Shane Young is the co-founder of Asano, and his journey started in the back of a hair salon in Ponsonby. It's as grassroots a story as it gets. He's a self-taught formulator, a human guinea pig, and the favours that he called upon from his friends and family were remarkable.
When the wax set, it would be a bit messy, so we'd get our friends around and we'd put on beer and pizza, and they'd help us clean the pots up and cap them and put a label on the top and a label on the bottom.
Through perseverance and hard work, 4 years into the business, they get a great opportunity to stock in hundreds of supermarkets in Australia. Everything's on the line, all of their capital, plus a line of credit from the bank. And then, disaster.
I go to the aisle to check on the stock, and as I go there, something had leaked out of one of the products, and there was a puddle on the ground of like yellow stuff, and I was like, oh, that's not going to be good. And so I went through it, and it turns out something had separated in transit. Probably a third of the products had separated, and this is our launch. So we went from just, riding high and 100%, and we're going to, oh God, that's it, the business is over. Now 4 years is down the toilet. So anyway, our dreams were dashed. Right, this is it. As soon as this goes back to the buyer, that took a real chance with us, to be honest.
When times are good, it's easy to stay focused on your goal. It's when times get tough and dark and uncertain that the power of one thing becomes super important.
If you don't have a guiding light, you can always fall back to, especially in the hard times, because everyone's there. We used to have a saying, everyone's there for the high fives. It's when it all falls over and you look around the room, that's when it counts, right?
Shane and his co-founder AJ Gadsden took the business from the back of a Ponsonby salon to 14,000 retailers worldwide. So how do you double the business in 18 months, develop 800 products, enter 15 countries, build a world-class team, and have a successful exit? Well, Shane Young has some and maybe all of the answers. And this is a story not many know, and one you really don't want to miss. Shane Young, my friend, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Josh. Thanks for having me.
For a period of time there with your business, Asano, you were endeavouring to make a skincare product which was appropriate for the sensitive skin. And you tested, I believe, 200 different formulations on your face. Was there a period of time where your mates are going, hey, listen, bro, this is a bit like more self-harm or self-flagellation than it seems to be product development? Maybe an intervention could have happened?
Yeah, good question. So we launched a brand in 2007 called Primal Earth, and that was a men's shaving range. And so we sort of had to do quite a big deep dive into understanding the shaving category. And it really highlighted straight away to us that most of the products, we are talking a few years ago, so I haven't checked them recently, most of them would have sensitive skin written on them. So when we sort of delve into the data, it was like, okay, there's definitely a problem here that needs to be solved. And these are all the big brands, the Gillettes and P&Gs and what have you. So we ended up arriving in a position that most guys had an issue with sensitive skin. It just depended whether you're using a very, very sharp blade to activate that. And that's what we literally started trials on, would be putting on creams and using a razor, and on my skin it would take a very, very fine layer off. And of course, if there was anything in it that was going to react, a lot of the time it was the sulfates, it would blow up red. So if I knew there was a chance of that, I'd try and keep it off my face, because having a red face, and it did become a bit of a joke, Shane and his rash, we don't have to deep dive into that. And that was generally just so I got quite bad eczema around here. And I remember when we first started doing the trials for Primal Earth, I was just in the Augusto and all. Arms were fine, so I put it on my face and it broke out bright red there for about 2 weeks. And valuable lesson learned. So I was the guinea pig.
Good on you, because most cosmetics companies are associated, what they do is they say not tested on animals. So maybe what you should have had on the packaging is not tested on Shane.
Yeah,
not animals.
Just tested on us. We often got asked, AJ and myself, why did you get into ladies' natural skin care? And it was because we got into men's natural shave products because of my reaction to chemicals. So it was a real sort of, it was a trend, but we had a real need we were trying to fix. So it was an easy step.
Yeah. It's one of the key methods that I talk about of finding the thing that you should orient yourself towards in starting a business is having a felt or an observed problem.
Yeah.
And so you're living into that specific thing that yourself, you're kind of solving a problem for yourself, but it turns out that through your research, many, many others had the same problem that you also resolved.
Yeah. There's a real eye. And of course, it's not barbecue conversations. And AJ and myself would often joke about that. You're not sitting at a barbecue with a bunch of guys, flipping the meat over, talking about your sensitivity to cosmetics, right? So it was a good opportunity to sort of start those conversations when you were handing out samples, saying, "Look, we've got this new product we're bringing out. Do you think you could try it?" And so they'd take it home and try it, and then we started getting quite a bit of feedback from people. So it was a great, it was a good conversation starter.
Yeah,
for sure.
I wonder if that's our demographic that doesn't go into those sensitive skincare conversations around a barbecue, but maybe the younger demographic might.
Well, back then it was sort of the metrosexual was sort of a term, right? Do you remember that?
I totally do, which in and of itself is a little bit derogatory as a label is now. But I've been called metrosexual in the past. Yeah. You probably got the same.
Absolutely. Hairdresser.
Yes.
So,
yeah. Hey, so we've dabbled around hairdressing, barbering, Asano. Let's go back. So the backstory, as I understand it, is that you were operating your barbershop out of Ponsonby, and you were dabbling in mixing up a brew, which was a wax, and then you met AJ Gadsden. So pick that story up from there, if you could, please.
Yeah, sure. So it's even one step further than that, actually, Josh. Just up the road from here in Shortland Street, I had it's probably an upmarket barbershop. Barbering wasn't as big as it is now. So we were coming out of a sort of barbering moved in sort of unisex into the 70s and the 80s. And in actual Auckland back probably late 80s, early 90s, there just weren't really any of the red, white and blue barbers that we see around now. So we mostly did guys, mostly corporates, quite upmarket, affordable haircuts. And Debrett's, literally behind us here, Debrett's and High Street was sort of really the centre of entertainment in the city back then. And we used to have a lot of the bouncers would come in and get all their fades done. And so I'd be selling them Dax Wax, a product that most people know, very hard to get in, it's very hard to get out, but it really suited that tight curly hair. They loved it. Ended up being the largest seller of those type of waxes in central Auckland. And I remember looking at the bottom of the can one day, and I was like, there's 4 things in this, and one of them is fragrance. Like, how hard can it be? And one of my clients, his wife worked in raw materials for the cosmetic industry. So a few conversations with him. I went out and saw her. She got me some materials. I literally took them home and started mixing them in a pan, and then trialing them myself right from the start. I was the guinea pig, and found a formula with some essential oils that sort of worked okay. So I started bringing them to work and trialing it with my clients. And then a few of the boys were like, "Can you sell us some of this?" I'm like, okay. So I had to go out and find pots, bought a printer and started printing out labels. And then I was selling this wax for $20, literally 50 meters from where we're talking now. And that would have been early 90s. So fast forward a bit, my partner at the time, she was then selling that into salons and wholesalers. We separated. I was living in a flat in St Mary's Bay, still making the product for her, but begrudgingly, to be honest, at that stage. And one of my flatmates brings home the new boyfriend, and he's like, "What's that smell in the flat?" And she was like, "Oh, it's my crazy flatmate downstairs pouring hair wax out." So he comes down, and down the stairs comes this guy, Anthony Gadsden, with spiky hairdos, as we did in the 90s. And he was like, "What are you doing?" I'm like, "I'm pouring out wax for my ex-girlfriend." And I had spiky hair, he had spiky hair. And so he went away, came back a couple of days later. He said, "I think we need a business plan." So we sort of formed a bit of a relationship and a lot of brainstorming, and worked out how do we bring out a product that we could go and get into the supermarkets. And literally started there. I was in my Ponsonby flat at that stage. And so that, we've got photos of us with our big 44-gallon drum with wax in. And so I would cut hair, I'd load all the materials in the morning, cut hair all day. He had a corporate job. He'd turn up in a suit. We'd get changed into like full outfits. and gloves, and we'd pour all this wax out. Probably 2-3 hours it would take. So we did that for a couple of months, and of course, we had to, when the wax set, it would be a bit messy. So we'd get our friends around, and we'd put on beer and pizza, and they'd help us clean the pots up and cap them and put a label on the top and a label on the bottom. And we've got all this video footage back of those days, which is crazy to think now. So that event over time started to turn into quite a big event. And I think by the end of it, you'd have 30 to 40 people turning up for free beer and pizza to help label pots. And at that stage, we thought there must be a more effective way. And so we went out and found a contractor, because it was costing us a fortune for beer and pizza.
I was going to say, the cost ratio to return.
The ROI wasn't really there. No, terrible. There was some great times had. And of course, it was a barbershop on Jervois Road with a lot of the clients going past. And of course, there were these parties happening pretty much every 6 weeks. And there were lots of eye rolling from going past. But we had a great time. We got out. That was our first product to market. Now I had to bring a prop for you today, because I've kept hold of this pot here. So this was the third batch we ever made. Wow! And of course, we're here to talk about the trials and tribulations of how we made it to the exit. So this was screen printed, and back then I was in charge of doing all the copy. So this was, I think we did 10,000 units in a batch. It's the third batch. And on the back, I almost had to put on my glasses, but I do need to put on my glasses.
I can read it for you if you like. I can put on a radio announcer's book.
Yeah, we'll do that. You've got to read, just read that line.
Okay.
Channel Mike Hosking.
Channel name and Mike Hosking. Not tested on animals.
No, not tested on animals.
Oh, I love this. Wash, towel dry, and then style.
No, it's the dominate line in the middle.
Dominate your style with dominate wax.
Yeah, so you missed a bit, and I'll have to point it out.
Yeah.
Remember, I was in charge of the copy for this. It actually says dominate your style with dominate wax super hair hold. So our third batch has a spelling mistake in, so this is actually a collector's edition, which is why I've kept it. And so this product in here is 20 years old.
It's still going strong?
Still smells good.
Okay, amazing.
Might bring back some memories.
Yeah, it does. Yeah.
Could say a bit about what it's made of, obviously, which is a lot of petroleum.
I was going to say, it smells like a chapstick.
Yeah. So third batch, spelling mistake. So it was very clear that Shane should not be in charge of doing the copy after this one, right? But yeah, I've kept that pot and a couple of others through the journey, because it was those things at the time. There was a bit of eye roll, and that you look back with fondness now and think, what were we doing? But, it was all care, no responsibility to some degree for some of the copy work.
Back in those days, you were doing things that felt right to do at the outset.
Yeah.
There's a lot of discussion with startups around doing things in the early days that don't necessarily scale.
Yes.
And so you were kind of deep in going, let's get some beer and pizza. It works for 3 people. Then you get to 30 people and you're losing money because it's just a party rather than it is kind of a product kind of building kind of thing. But early on for you then, were there other things that you perhaps had some organic approaches to that you really found broke as you started to scale the business alongside that thing?
Yeah. So I think just backing up for a bit of context, Josh, there was, although there were party times, I literally had a conversation yesterday with someone that is in a startup, and so it's quite fresh and topical. This was our side hustle, right? We weren't all in. AJ had a full-time corporate job that was quite intense and stressful. I was running, I think back then, 6 staff, doing this after hours, living above the shop, and this was the side hustle. We had a wall of where we wanted to go. Exit was on there right from day dot, right? And we knew that if we could, the actual proposition around this one product, if we could develop something as good as the market leader and make it more cost effective and get it out to a wider distribution, we had a business model. And that literally, we held on to that philosophy right through to our exit. So quality was a key part right from day one, where it had to be something that we would want to use ourselves. So in terms of, to your point, stuff that didn't scale, it wasn't so much that we were deep diving very early on the operational side, but we had the vision, and we knew there was going to be lots of things we were going to have to navigate there. And we had a strategy wall literally at the back of the shop where each time AJ would turn up, we'd sort of look at, refine, stay focused, But yeah, pretty quick. Once we got a bit of traction with the product, the very first hurdle was, well, there's only so many hours in the day. We're going to have to find a better way to do this. So that's when we went out and found contract manufacturing and sort of started that conversation with other guys that were set up to make the products.
Hi, it's Josh. Thanks for listening to the show. When founders talk about the dream exit, they're really talking about freedom. Freedom to choose how to use their time and to decide what comes next. As a client of JB Ware in New Zealand, I know this is what sets them apart. They help entrepreneurs and leaders turn success into significance. A great exit isn't just about the commas in your bank account. It's about what those commas allow you to create. Two Commas is proudly partnered with JB Ware, helping founders by putting their wealth to work for generations.
Where did that discipline and rhythm for strategic orientation and execution come from? While you're thinking about that, the reason I ask that question is that it may or may not surprise you to learn that most people that I talk to, founders and owners, they lack some really key aspects of getting strategy right. Either it's too complicated, too vague, there's not enough certainty on the things that we're going to be executing upon to get ourselves there. They're missing out some of the critical elements that would enable a full strategy. But one of the key, absolutely key aspects, and I continue to orient people towards this, i.e. beat it into their heads, that you need to be looking at this thing and talking about this thing at least monthly, preferably weekly with your management team, and then with the team on a monthly basis. We call it the SLT meeting, senior leadership team meeting, or the all hands meeting, which is all of the company, or the town hall, which is the thing you do on a quarterly basis. You need to be looking at this thing, talking about this thing, and why it's important every single time. You guys did this at the start. Where did that come from?
Yeah, so a good question, Josh. I guess probably comes down partly to the right combination. AJ was in quite a corporate environment. He's pretty smart with business stuff. So he sort of brought a real disciplined approach to his area, and we had quite non-competing skills, whereas I came from the hard graft. But to your point, if you don't have a guiding light that you can always fall back to, especially in the hard times, because everyone's there, we used to have a saying, everyone's there for the high fives. It's when it all falls over and you look around the room, that's when it counts, right? Mm-hmm. And whether you want to call it your values or your vision wall or your guiding light, that's when that stuff really matters, because it's easy to, to give up or not pivot, or, if that North Star isn't pretty true and you're all able to keep focused on it, it becomes pretty disorganized pretty fast.
Yeah.
And we did see a bit of that. So, yeah.
Yeah, we'll talk to those in a minute. The other thing which was really interesting that you mentioned is that you had a clarity that you were building the business for exit early on. What I heard you say, that the things that you believed were going to be critical in achieving a good exit was a market leadership position.
Yep.
BCG, Boston Consulting Group, talk about being number one or number two in a market. If you're not there, then you should cancel that product or cancel that line, but it should be your aspiration to be in that space. You talked about the importance of distribution. And then you mentioned product as well. What else, and it may just be those three things that you believed were the critical elements of building a business that someone would want to buy?
Well, back then, Josh, I guess the real light on for us that there needed to be an exit is when you were going to be competing in a space, supermarkets, and there just weren't little guys in that space. So it really came from if we're going to survive in there, we're either going to have to build a brand that really stands for something that retailers want and consumers love. And if that was the case, big boys are either going to squash you or they're going to buy you. So it really came from that. I mean, I'd love to say we had a really detailed plan around it. It was just like, this is going to work. We're either it's going to go one way or the other. So very early on, it was on the strategy wall that the exit was, going to have to be at some stage because of that reason.
Yeah, I get it. So clearly you scaled from your barber's back shop into the apartment or the home that you were living in, manufacturing, and you went to the stage of committing to this full time. When was that, and why did you make the jump?
Yeah, so we started in with the contractors, and we're condensing quite a bit of, remember this is over 25 years, right? So I'm condensing stuff into in my mind, I can flick through it quite quickly. But over a period of months, we got on shelf one product that I've shown you there. And AJ was always great with the data. So we were able to track, performance and promotions. And Really understood that space quite well. It was hilarious though, for the fact that I was a hairdresser now talking about total key accounts data, which everyone thought was quite funny at the time. And dealing with the contractor, there were a whole new set of issues. We sort of moved from our party friends to, compliance and regulatory and dealing. There was a lot of learning there, which I enjoyed doing. So we both kept this as our side hustle, I think, for about 18 months. And our one product started doing quite well. And so we knew, well, you're going to need more than one product to build a brand. So we started working on the second product with another contract manufacturer. And so now I was pretty busy. My days were long, but you were really driven. The first product's working. So I focused a lot on, again, getting all the samples and trying them on my clients and really refining that proposition. So we got 2 products. We launched the second product in NZ, instantly started selling quite well. We now have more shelf presence. We had a product that was comparable. You might remember, Josh, you're probably from the summertime. Back then, the biggest selling hairstyling product was a product called Budge Hair Shaper.
Oh, yes. I was a very keen user of it.
Yeah. So, that was massive. So that was the target, that we wanted to replicate something as good as that. And we got very, very close to it. And of course, we were half the price selling in supermarkets, because you were paying sort of $25
in plan money, which is $50-$60 in plan money.
Yeah. So, a very similar product. It had its own style. It was called Dominate Funk. It's quite edgy. We thought it was a bit cooler. And instantly, so these 2 products are doing well. So we thought, okay, Australia is the target. So looking back, that was probably really the ballsy call, that we just thought that we could just jump the ditch and make it work.
Can I just pause there for a second? When you say doing well, are you doing 10 grand a month, 100 grand a month, 3 grand a month, just approximately?
Yeah, no, we were between 20 and 30 grand.
Okay. So you're nudging up towards, in today dollars, high hundreds of thousands per annum, getting close towards $1 million of revenue per year.
And it's all going, we literally bootstrapped it. We didn't have any investors. There's money on credit cards. I'm still cutting hair. Business partner's still doing his corporate gigs. So everything went into those. So looking back, everything mattered. There wasn't spare cash. And it wasn't so much in labour, because it was sweat equity for both of us, but it was packaging. Big runs now, we had to start buying. We had to understand what planning around that stuff would mean. So fast forward, so we had some good data, good presentations. Again, really thanks to AJ's background. We got a meeting with Woolworths Australia. So we flew over there. We stayed I think I slept in the bath because he snored so much. We had a 1-bedroom place. And we were, it's burnt into my brain, us in Oxford Street at a cafe in the morning, full suits, doing our presentation to each other, like in traffic and buses and trucks. And Oxford Street's crazy, right? And so we're just rehearsing. And we get in this meeting, and I was so nervous. I just ran through pretty much all my stuff too fast. And when we got AJ, it was like, it was good, but you probably talked a bit quick. So... Anyway, the guy was interested, but the buyer said, okay, yeah, your data looks good. And then the sheep joke started. How many sheep have you tried this on? I'm like, oh, yeah, great joke. And so he said, you've got, I think we had 8 units in a tray, and we hadn't factored the shelf depth over there was smaller than what they had here.
Huh.
So they could only put 6 units. So he said, go away and bring me a shelf tray with 6 units, and I'll give you another meeting. So we thought it's positive. Went back, changed the shelf tray, got another meeting with him. Go back over, he said, your tray's too wide. Like, you need to shave a centimetre for you. And, looking back, it was too wide. But,
right.
We're like, okay, third meeting. Went back, redone it up, came back. He said, your shelf, there was something. We're up to meeting number 6, right? Remember, no money. Doing it on the smell of an oily rag. So we thought, what we need is, a couple of Kiwi boys turning up here with spiky hairdos, promising the world great data. The data almost looked a bit too good. Years later, we went through the presentation. We're like, yeah, it probably would have been a bit unbelievable, because it was real numbers. We were doing pretty well in NZ, but versus what the equivalent product in Aussie would do was doing a third of what we said we could sell. So, we probably should have toned it down a bit. So we found an Aussie broker, and all we wanted was someone that we could take into the meeting that had a bit of street cred. He didn't have spiky hair, And so we took this guy to the meeting, and in the meeting, the buyer said, "Okay, yeah, I'd love it to give you 500 stores." And we both look at each other, and the broker looks at it, and we're like, "Okay, that's good news."
That sounds good.
Yeah, it sounds good. And we came out and we did a rookie move. We all high-fived in the foyer, and that was a rookie move because the saying after that was, "It ain't no go until you get the PO." And the broker said he'd been doing this for 30 years. He'd never seen a buyer in a meeting say you've got 500 stalls. So we thought that's got to be a good sign. So we were pretty chuffed. So we got purchase orders, went to the bank, borrowed more money. Now we've got an Aussie launch on the map. So we
Did you get the purchase order?
We got the purchase orders.
Okay.
Got the purchase orders. Took them to back then. I think it was the National Bank.
Yes.
Right. That merged into ANZ, and we had a great bank manager. Woolworths on the PPO. So we got an advance, bought more packaging.
I'll pause there for a second.
Sure.
Because I'm guessing what needed to happen is that they'd given you an assurance or an order for a whole bunch of product, and therefore you need to go and manufacture that product, which meant buying the raw materials.
Yes.
And you needed to get money, capital to enable that to happen.
Yeah.
So you went to the bank with a promissory order or an order from Woolworths, which is worth its weight in gold. Exactly. I've got a great story, actually. I'm going to pause on this. Hyundai, the car manufacturer in the 1970s, was endeavouring to be a diversified conglomerate, is what we call it today. And got to remember, in the early 1970s, they were not long behind the Korean War, and they were endeavouring to build this manufacturing base. We now know South Korea as an incredible manufacturing base, high-tech cars and heavy industrial equipment, but in the 1970s, they were nothing. And so the founder of Hyundai went to Lloyd's Banking Group in London, amongst many others, but Lloyd's was the famous one, and said, I need to borrow $50 million. What for? Well, we'd like to manufacture ships. How many ships have you built? None. But the chairman, the CEO, had a very clear vision that they were going to become the biggest ship manufacturer in the world. So they wouldn't get the money. So he went and found a Greek shipping magnate. I don't know why there's so many Greek shipping magnates, but there is. Greek shipping magnate. And he gave an order for 2 large container ships. So he gets this order. He goes back to Lloyd's. Lloyd's give him $100 million so he can go and borrow to manufacture these things and then build them. Within the decade, Hyundai became the largest manufacturer of commercial cargo ships in the world based upon that one thing.
Amazing.
Yeah, phenomenal story. So the point there is, the lesson there is, if you're endeavouring to get finance, if you turn up with an order, then you might be able to work around it and kind of, get the
absolutely. I mean, the blue chip people in the market too, right? So I think will work for us. Woolworths, pretty big brand.
Yeah. Did you think at that stage, because we'd be 2005, 2005 at this stage?
2004.
Yeah. So borrowing money from the bank for business goes through phases of being difficult or impossible in New Zealand. It's never been the easiest thing in New Zealand. And because if you don't have a house to put the money against, which is not the business, that's your personal property. It should be, but the banks just demand you to have some security, and it's always the house that they want from you. So you didn't have a house to be able to note against. Did you consider other routes of financing at that stage? Because 2004, I was doing investment, but I was like one of 5 people in New Zealand that were investing in startups at that stage. So that wasn't a route that was available. Did you think about friends and family, mum and dad?
Yeah, so there was a good question, Josh. Yes, so there was friends and family money in at that stage.
Okay.
And part of it was, we've been going 4 years by then. So we had a track record.
Right.
And so there was. But the bank had always been, to be honest, they've been great supporters of us right from the start.
Amazing.
And probably part of, because we took our strategy wall, we had good documents, we understood the markets. So we provided all that collateral. It might have been a bit different where you literally did have a manager that you were dealing with that really understood what you were doing. And the numbers were reasonably large for a couple of young guys that started. We've managed to get traction at Spiky Headers. Trying to think when they ended, actually, because that's been a lot part of the story. They did end at some stage. Hopefully they ended when the trend ended, though.
It's probably more real
rather than still holding on to them
when our hair started to fall out. That's probably when it actually happened.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So there is more to that story, which is worth telling in terms of down cycles.
Yeah.
So we came back, got more money, went to the contract. I mean, we had 2 contract manufacturers. One was doing our wax, one was doing this new funk product. And of course, I think both of them rolled their eyes, and we went and saw them beforehand and said, if we could get an order, can you guys supply, And of course, they had lead times and what have you, and they never really thought that we were going to get this order, as it turns out. So we come back, and it was quite a bit of scrambling around, pressure put on them to deliver the product. Shipped the product over. We had marine insurance for it. We tried to, still part-time gig. This is still a side hustle at this stage. So we're working with our broker now. It's all guns blazing. We got promo people. We're going to do a big launch at a supermarket in Brisbane. It was sort of a flagship Woolworths store that launched. So we flew over there, picked up at the airport with the broker, all excited, drive to the supermarket. Promo girls are all there, all branded up and dominate. It was a thing. We have media
Deal.
and the whole lot. So I go to the aisle to check on the stock, and as I go there, I had two products. I think we'd had a little bit. Something had leaked out of one of the products, and there was a puddle on the ground of like yellow stuff, and I was like, "Oh, that's not going to be good." And so I went through it, and it turns out something had separated in transit. Well, we didn't know at the stage; it was all unknown. But you could imagine the build up, 6 meetings. We got it. Stock, money, manufacturing, fly over, the look on my face, probably should have taken one. And so AJ comes over and we're like, oh, that's not going to be good. So we went through it. Yeah, probably a third of the products had separated. And this is our launch. So we went from just, riding high and 100%, and we're going to, oh God, that's it. The business is over. Our 4 years is down the toilet.
Yeah.
So
what did you do?
So AJ got on a plane and went back. So we cancelled the event. I think we did a visit to a couple of other stores. Same thing we found. Little puddles of yellow stuff or stuff leaking out. Or actually, a couple of the stores, the stuff that had leaked out had stuck to the tray that we had all the products on, and you couldn't get the product out of the tray. I'm like, well, that's not going to be good. So anyway, our dreams were dashed. Right, this is it. As soon as this goes back to the buyer, that took a real chance with us, to be honest. It's all over. So I flew this. So we're in Brisbane. So I flew to Sydney. We had it, I think, in a main freight down there. AJ went back to work, and I literally opened. We had just pallet loads of stock. So I went through every single box I opened, and roughly about a quarter of them were damaged, and the rest seemed okay. So a big pile of the damaged stuff, okay stuff. We sort of thought, oh, well, it's going to be over, because we couldn't afford the cost to send people in to every store around the country to swap that stock out. We would have been broke. So there was no way. So we really had no option but to just tuck and roll. So I remember coming back, it was it was dark days. Josh, it was dark days. We regrouped. What are we going to do? Well, there's nothing we really can do. We're really just waiting for the phone call from the buyer to say, well, I gave you a chance and you've blown it. And we were still getting the data on sales, and it was flat probably for about 8 to 10 weeks. And then bit by bit, orders started to dribble through for some of the stock. And we're like, oh, hang on, we haven't had a phone call from the buyer. Stock, and we didn't go to all the stores to swap it out. So we're thinking, well, maybe we just went to the worst stores. You're telling me yourself these stories. So we thought, okay, we've still got a business. So again, one of the contractors, awesome. The other contractor, we had some issues with. They're now not around, so we certainly wouldn't want to name them, but there was some formulation issues there. And the marine insurance wouldn't pay out. They said, no, it's a formulation issue. And the contractor said, no, it's not a formulation issue. It's how you shipped it. You should have put it in a cool store container, so no one would pay for it. So we've got this debt to the bank. No one will pay for it. So what did we do? We thought, stuff it. We're going to set up our own factory. So Shane got all the competitors' products and just started. Remember, I didn't have a chemistry background, but I was a bit of a street brawler with that stuff. So I went through all the competing products and identified there was one raw material that everyone else had that we didn't have. So I got that material, got samples of all the other ingredients, which, this took a little bit of time. It didn't happen in a couple of days, and literally just started testing stuff in the oven to see what would separate at what temperature. and it was a process of elimination. I had been asked, why don't you go and get, an expert to help? But there just weren't experts around. It wasn't like there is now where you could probably get a vast amount of information off the internet. So it was just trial and error. And so we went and we took out a lease on a real tiny factory out in Great South Road, and we got wind staff in. Back then, I think the government would help pay half the wages. We kept the wax product with the wax contractor. We went, AJ had a friend that had a chocolate factory, and he had this big chocolate tank that he gave us, and we wired that up and got water running through it, and that became a manufacturing tank. We've got all these photos, so that's in the corner of the factory, and we started pumping out this product, didn't separate, and we started resupplying that into Australia. And we hired a couple of people out of the industry that knew what they were doing, so we quality control. And within sort of 4 or 5 months, I guess, of that disaster, we were forced to set up our own business because large contractors screwed it up. So, and that's how we ended up doing manufacturing, because a lot of people over the years have said, why would you want a manufacturing? And it was sort of a needs must at the time. So I was still cutting hair at the stage. So I'd get up at 5 a.m. I would drive out to Great South Road, roll up the roller door, get all the tables out, get the paperwork ready, staff would start rolling in. We had a mate of ours, we deputised him production manager. He had no production manager skills at all, and he would manage the staff. I would go and cut hair and sort of leave around 3 o'clock, come back out, check all the labels were on straight, count all the numbers, make sure no one was flogging the product, and that was a day's work. And so I did that probably for about 6 months. And when we finally realised that Australia wasn't going to kick us out, numbers weren't fantastic, but they were okay. We'd resupply this product in. We then went to the other contract manufacturer, and this is another good part of the story, Josh. The Dominate wax that you saw there, when we went to the contract, they'd never let us out the back of their factory. So I always dealt with them in their office, and they're great people to this day. They've been great people to deal with. And we had to go and we came to an arrangement. We've set up our own manufacturing now. And we told them, they knew about the disaster, like I'm sad. And so we need to come pick up all our pots and all our packaging. And when we went there, the reason they wouldn't let us out the back is they just had all the pots on a table and they were pouring in jugs just like we were. So they didn't want us to see that they were doing exactly the same thing. So that's all we did. We lined all the pots out and, poured all the products. So now we've got 2 products, our own tiny little factory, and now the headache of having your own staff and what have you. Sales started to pick up a bit in Oz, and then everything sort of turned around, like with our own products. So we're like, well, that's it. We're now manufacturers and sellers of product. And so it was probably the biggest defining moment that really allowed us to, which was a disaster at the time. We can still remember the feelings of 4 years of hard work down the toilet. But if that hadn't happened, we wouldn't have been able to, have speed to market and really controlled our own destiny around, fast forward years. We'd go and we were in the UK. We launched into Superdrug over there. We'd bring products back from the UK. We'd have samples done up within 2, 3, 4 days. We'd then get a meeting with the local rep or the Aussie and present them products literally within 2 weeks. And so that actually became, a superpower for us, really, was that, really owning that bit of the equation.
Yeah, right.
But at the time, it wasn't a great feeling.
Oh, no, never.
Yeah.
And that's a great rollicking story, by the way.
Yeah.
Thank you so
I
much.
I don't think I've told anyone that for quite a while. So
Okay, that's a great story.
Yeah. Because people, with our exit, a lot of people say, why didn't you just go to contractors? I said, well, let me tell you. And go to contractors.
Yeah, I've got a view on it, by the way, and I'll just pause and kind of highlight a couple of things here along the way. So the first one is that there's a saying that I have adopted over time. I can't remember where I heard it, which is that if something negative happens in life, and negative things just happen in life, there is no good nor bad, only thinking makes it so. What makes it negative? Well, if there's pain that's associated with that thing, or if there's expense, or if there's really a high amount of difficulty to resolve that problem, that makes it a bad thing to happen. And we can, the quality of our life is determined by what we make those things mean, how we frame those things, right? So that's why you can have two people that have exactly the same experience, and for one it destroys their life, and for the other one it creates their ability to become the person that they become over time. I've got a great simple expression here. It's that if something bad happens in your life, it doesn't happen to you, it happens for you. And so the framing is, when you can get yourself to the right headspace, is to go, so why has this happened for me? That's me doing a teaching moment, intentional, not for you. For
No, very true, wise words. And it doesn't seem like it for you when you're in that
in the moment. No, it seems awful.
You've got to get learning.
Yeah, there's adrenaline, there's cortisol, there's frustration.
Dreams up in flames.
Oh, yeah, totally. All your hopes and dreams kind of, doused. So I think that's a critical framing. And what it does for me is it separates out someone who could have a bit of the victim mentality, because 2 is victim, whereas 4 is ownership, versus those that have ownership mentality. But I'm going to go back a step here because you said that it forced you into the manufacturing game. And what you said earlier on is that you realized that there were 3 things that were going to impact upon your ability to have a good exit. And one of them was product. Now, when I'm talking about staffing, so this is the part of the automation conversation I have with people, there's things that we can automate, there's things that we can't automate. And one of the things that we should be careful about, because you can either automate or outsource if there's low value functions inside the the organization. One of the things you need to be quite conscious and careful of is that if that thing is of high strategic importance to you and to your business, you need to own it. You can't outsource it, firstly. You might be able to automate parts of it, but you've got to make sure there's humans involved at critical checkpoints along the way. So what I'm hearing you say, and let me just correct me if I'm wrong on this, is that product was of vital importance to you. The assembly of that product, the manufacturing of that product, therefore, is an important part, just as the formulation of that product is important, and then the putting together of the ingredients is important. So it actually forced you to become good at something that was going to be of real value to your business down the path. Is that right?
Yeah, very true. Yeah, and not just products, just product quality, I guess. There was that, we've already discussed around, the rashes and what have you, but making sure that we had, good quality materials, and we really understood that, the source and what have you. I mean, part of what really worked by default is, as we got bigger, we had a lot more bargaining power around this stuff. So we were able to sort of bypass a lot of the smaller players and go direct to the source, get better pricing, really understand, how products were made and developed, and, that was sort of the bit that I was quite good at doing. But so product quality was really important, having quite a high standard around that. And we needed to, because we were up against the biggest players in the world. We literally were up against Weller, L'Oreal,
multi-billion-dollar organizations.
So and we that's what we looked at when we thought, well, where's the benchmark? It's global. So global and export was, as well as exit, that was on our radar right from day dot, because that's who we were competing against. So, I think there's a good lesson there for Kiwi brands and Aussie brands. You've really got to see, a lot of people see the guy next door as their competition, but you should be more focused on what the global players are. We're in a global market. Now everything, in that fashion cycle is so fast when it's on TikTok and Instagram, what have you, right? Back then, it wasn't so much. It was actually quite a delay. We spent a bit of time, as I just mentioned, we got them to the UK to Superdrug, which is another great story. Not quite as disaster, but we certainly had some interesting moments. And, there's this real delay of probably 18 months or 2 years of a trend happening in the UK that would then see potentially end up here. Whereas now it's not instantaneous, but it's quick. It would be months, right? Something can be launched in the States and what have you, because you've got to sort of do international launches now.
You had your manufacturing facility. I know that you went through 3 of those ultimately over time. You were adding product lines. There was another key moment when you decided to get into the skincare game.
Correct. So again, you might join this to our earlier conversation. So that came about, we were selling into Woolworths. I think we were in Coles at that stage.
Those are the essentially 80% of the supermarket.
Retail. So just to give perspective to it, I mean, back then there were 400 total supermarkets in NZ, and now we're in 2,000 in Australia. So if you can do that jump, it's probably quite a bit different now with the likes of the Chemist Warehouse, which are a very strong player, the Price Lines, Kmart's. But back then, going from 400 and the scale up for that, and then going to 2,000 and the scale up to that was a big learning curve, big lessons, a lot of stress. So we were in Sydney. We had separate rooms now and didn't have spiky hair. All right, I can remember. So this must have been...
We're all grown up as a company.
This is 2006.
Right.
No spiky hairdos in 2006. AJ might correct me with that one. So I couldn't, because of my eczema, I'm a dermatitis, I couldn't shave with a normal shave product. So I was using a Health Basics product, plug for James, that was soap-free. So it was a body cleansing thing, and I literally, put it on, and I could shave, and I wouldn't break out in a rash. And I remember going into AJ's room, because we could afford rooms at that stage, and he was using like this product called 10 product that he was putting on after he shaved, because he'd have reactions, sensitive skin. So I was like, hang on, we make cosmetics. Why aren't we, this is a problem. Why aren't we looking at this? So that literally was the start of, we came back and we had a look at a King of Shades. Well, King from the UK was really big. It was big in Australia, it was massive in the UK. So we started having a look at what he was doing, and I really got branding and design. So it was a real education for us, sort of doing a deep dive. And we knew we could I was sure we could do a similar product and make it more natural. Whereas he had sort of all the sulfates and stuff. And so I couldn't shave with the King of Shades product, it would break out. So I literally started on my arms, 200 tests I did, and finally found a formula that didn't react to. And that turned into to Primal Earth. So a totally separate brand from the hair care. And again, tested, I was the guinea pig, shown as Rash. And so massive launch. We had things were tight, but we had a bit more capital. We had a bit of street cred now with buyers. We had like full shelves of Dominate,
the right size boxes.
And looking back to that point, he was totally right. It beat us into shape, right? The Aussies beat into shape. So then we had a shaving brand. I think we launched with like 5 SKUs. And through that journey, I started to understand, okay, well, why am I allergic to these chemicals? And it was all new to me, Josh. We were pretty early. Like men's shave is quite niche in a supermarket, but natural men's shave is super niche in a supermarket. So we were definitely early, but that obviously led into the sort of real education around parabens and sulfates and what are they and what are the issues, and which eventually led into us sort of really understanding that stuff around Asana. So we were living and breathing it. It wasn't just a marketing tagline. We really understood what was in it, and it was back to that quality piece. It was the whole supply chain.
Yeah.
So what had started being a disaster with the separation product, again, ended up being the golden goose for us, because without that, we would have been relying on someone else telling us about product quality, and we really lived and breathed it with our now non-spiky hairdos, and now great shaving products. So we launched that. We did a bit of IP trading. We were in the States, going back and forth trying to find an angle there. We launched in the UK, and we noticed in the UK there was a Procter & Gamble brand called New Wave hair gel. And we'd looked at doing hair gel for Dominate. We sort of had quite premium pricing here, and hair gel back then, it was pretty, it was $5, and we didn't want to bring out a $5 product. And so we saw this New Wave. So we came back and we saw that P&G hadn't licensed the intellectual property for New Wave in New Zealand and Australia. So we registered it, made up a new product called New Wave, and got into the supermarket. And we didn't think, knowing how many lawyers they must have, we thought there's no way we could get away with this. And we got away with it. So suddenly we had this new brand called New Wave, and
genius.
And it was really just speed to market. We literally came back. I checked on, Trade NZ, it was not there. Checked on Oz, wasn't there. So we got a pot that looked similar, and so next minute we're in the hair gel market with this hair gel. And we went gangbusters, like overnight, and took off.
Wow.
And we find out years later that when P&G, the local guys found, who are these guys in their garage making this hair wax? It became quite a story. So that ended up, that brand is still around. I digress. No, we eventually got out of the New Wave brand, but we switched to a brand called Shockwaves. It's still the number 1 selling hair gel in New Zealand, the number 2 in Oz. So we became the hair gel experts, and hair gel right now in 2025 has made quite a comeback. So I've got daughters, so ballet or dance and whatever, they're all using it. And with the current hairdos aren't spiky hairdos. As it turns out, hair gel works quite well for it. So that got us into the hair gel. So that's that. But
you've done a lot of research and a lot of self-testing on these skincare products. And so I'm really curious about if there was something that you could share with people, let's say men to start with, because I think that women are typically a little more better informed about skin care, skin quality products that they're putting on there. Sure. But let's say men, but as that pertains to people as well, what are some things that people should know about skincare products that they just don't?
Yeah, good question, Josh. I think the main bits would be, and I've seen recent data too, and that's just covering up on using an SPF product. I mean, it's the number one anti-aging thing you can do, and that's not to have high sun exposure. The amount of damage that happens from baking in the sun is really not good, and we have really high rates, and obviously in Australia and New Zealand, of related cancers to that. So number one is covering up. Yeah. And that can be, there's lots of options in that space. So I wouldn't want to be specific around what type, but look, I think the ladies would say guys are simple, but it's not so much we want it simple, but we don't need it overcomplicated, right? So we got that learning. We did a lot of research around when we launched Primal Earth around, well, what do guys want? Do they want like a 5-in-1 product that does everything? Right, which you assume
is that a thing? Yeah, probably.
Well, I've seen it. I've been into a few marketing groups where it has come up.
Right.
With the tagline, guys are either lazy or they're not really that interested in it. But as it turns out, they are. But they just want they only need a 3-step regime. So wash, cleanse, or tone, or moisturize. So having said that, it is a lot more sophisticated than it was back in early 2000s. So there's a lot more options. There's a lot more stuff that's sort of really been branded and targeted towards guys. Mm-hmm. So, So, look, I haven't probably really answered your question. But, I'm 75 years old and look at my skin. So,
you look incredible.
Yeah. It's amazing. That's it. You can tell I've said that before.
You're not, though. No.
No.
Put the dates together and I won't age you. But I'll change gears here and pick up a quote that one of my researchers dug up. And it's that you said that hiring much smarter woman was a turning point for Esano. Much smarter woman was a turning point for Esano. So what was it that you and AJ couldn't have done alone that they brought that enabled you to kind of build on the strategy of what you were doing before that?
Yeah. Okay. So I think, we've been quite a large part of the story with men's styling. Yep. Men's styling and then in sort of men's skincare. But when we got into ladies, 2 guys with spiky hairdos wasn't really a compelling founder story for this brand. So again, we literally started the brand by identifying that natural products were super expensive, quite limited in their reach, not that available. So our strategy I think in 2012 was when we started it. Asana launched in 2013. We really wanted to make natural products more accessible and more affordable. And we were the guys that were going to be able to do that because we could bulk buy a lot of the materials, and that's why it was expensive. So it was quite a journey trying to understand, so what is natural? What is organic? What's organic certified? It was an absolute minefield. There's no one global consistent standard that regulates any of that. It's different in Asia, Europe, and America. There's been a lot more harmonization over that time period. So again, we were quite early. I was quite passionate about it because of the quality and the products and the rashes. I really want to understand, these product pieces. So as we got into that and with ladies' products, we really need, stronger female representation selling female products to the ladies. And, Shane and his rash in the barbershop wasn't going to quite cut it.
It's not a great backstory.
Yeah. And as it turns out, there's some really smart people around that were able to get in touch with, that they were really, really keen to get involved. So early on around our research in that space, And it was a real education for AJ and myself too. So it was obvious that this is the right path to go to. So,
So you guys were quite clearly innovators in the space in which you were operating. You were bringing products to market that were quite leading, in some cases maybe bleeding edge in terms of that offering. How did you stay so dialed in to what it was that consumers were wanting or may want to go to next? Was there like a habit or a rhythm that you had around?
Yeah. Well, I mean, as I've already mentioned, Josh, I mean, I came at a hairdressing, and it's with hindsight, it's very, very fashion driven, and much like skincare, there was just this fashion cycle. So, for guys, it was big ones. We'll remember the David Beckham hairstyle.
Oh, yeah.
Remember that? That was a massive hairstyle. Well, we had a product that gave you that look, right? So you were able to find and follow these trends. There were big ones. The Beeb was another one.
Okay.
Beaver, the real
Yes.
shaggy beaver. Well,
Yes.
we had a product that could do that look. So, you just followed the trends. And it was always, trying to find, you didn't want to be too early. You'd spend all the money telling everyone about it. You don't want to be too late. There's no margin. So there's always a sweet spot with product, whether it's hair care or face care, where you want to try and, being number 3 quite often is more profitable than being number 1. Because the number 1 guys,
You're creating the market.
creating the market. So this doesn't work for all categories, obviously, but in the categories in consumer, around that fashion stuff, definitely. There's viable business models that want to be number 3 or 4.
Yes.
Right, let someone else do all the work, and then we come and make the money, and the ones after us, it'll be eroded. So, we, you hide the smart people around that. There's always trends happening. Like I mentioned earlier, that the trend cycle is a lot faster.
Yeah.
There is hit and miss stuff, but you don't want to. We had a saying, put it into context specifically around product development, not overall business strategy. The ready, fire, aim strategy was one we did adopt for certain countries or categories or shelves. If you waited to get perfect, it'd have moved. If you waited to get perfect, there'd be something you'd miss. So there was a melding of gut feel and science. It's an art and science. You could never get it 100%. And even when you did, there'd be someone that wouldn't be happy with it. Your shelf tray would be too big. Your cardboard would be too thick.
Yes.
Your barcode wouldn't be the right size, right? So then you always had that. But there were trends to follow.
Yeah, I get it. Yeah, talking about that first in market, first mover advantage is what it gets talked about in technology.
And in tech, it totally makes sense, right?
Yeah. Well, actually, sometimes not necessarily. So you're actually right in that second can be okay, especially if you can establish that very clear number 2 position. And actually being 20th or 100th is okay, as long as you've got a really clear niche position that you're operating within. Because each niche, if it's a big enough market, and markets tend to expand over time, that's what you want, right? As a market that's growing and growing and growing, is that you can have a super profitable little niche that's sitting inside that market and have a wonderful business. It's why to this day, for example, the CRM, which is one of the oldest forms of SaaS product that you can buy, 23 years ago, Salesforce was founded. Why there's still brand new CRM companies that are being started today and raising $100 million and building incredible products because they're servicing this little tiny niche. But that niche, well, it's not tiny. It happens to be a few $1 billion in scale.
Deep.
Yeah, it's exactly. It's very, very deep.
Yeah. So I guess in terms of comparison to Josh between sort of tech and maybe consumer, it's really that scaling piece is much different. I would say they're not all stuff, but you can scale a tech product pretty fast, right? Whereas
and ideally,
the back end and the time and the resource and the staff and the technicals that you need to scale a physical product is probably quite different. I'd mention.
Speaking of trends, I've heard this. You may or may not know whether it's a fact, but Zara, the fashion brand. So those companies don't tend to innovate in terms of the look. They go to the shows and they purchase looks that the main brands are putting out, the Cartiers, etc. of the world that they're putting out. Maybe it's a little haute couture, but anyway, the big brands. So they have buyers that go and buy these things at the shows. And I've heard they've got large container ships that they have converted into manufacturing facilities. And so they have a whole lot of machinists that are sitting downstairs. So they get the product, they pull it apart, they manufacture it on the boat, and it's into the market within weeks of it being on the runway.
That's speed to market, isn't it?
That's speed to market, right?
Look, even if it's not true, it's a bloody great story.
It's a bloody great story.
It's a great story,
Yeah.
Josh. Yeah.
So you had Dominate as a product, you had Wax, you had the Primal Man as a
Primal Earth.
Primal Earth as a product,
Yep.
and yet you moved the company to the space of Isano, both from a brand, you know, the offering that you had, and also the name of the company. So talk us through that piece and why.
Yeah. So in between Primal Earth men's, we then, there was the bee venom trend. So we thought, okay, the ladies' market is a lot greater. We'd sort of felt like we'd saturated that men's space, especially when we had a look overseas, trying to sell a niche men's product, a natural shave to the UK. There was just no money in doing it. So, and looking at the ladies' category, so the BVM trend, so we threw quite a bit of resource and tried to get into that market. And we really cut our teeth on the ladies' market, understanding sort of consumer needs and trends around that space. That didn't work. So we took that one on the chin. And through that, though, we had a lot of packaging around in our factory for ladies' products. So that's when we did up a new brand and presented it to the supermarket and got our first break. So it took off pretty fast, though. We weren't quite prepared. It's probably the antithesis of the separation story for us, Josh. So we literally presented the product, got it accepted, and it doubled the size of the business in 18 months.
Wow.
And the stresses and strains that we had through that, we came close to being broken. It was just, the amount of hours and staff management and finance. There were just non-stop issues, non-stop. So we launched with all these sort of quite fancy trial packs and with multiple components that were really fiddly. These are just details. So these are some of the stuff that we were dealing with. And we couldn't scale that. There were just too many components. We needed too many staff. So we were going to have to get a bigger factory just to even be able to manufacture this stuff. So we looked at outsourcing, and they added time and costs. So you're just constantly sort of going down various crossroads or dead ends, as it turns out, and being prepared to pivot quite fast on them. And I guess because we weren't still a big organisation, we really only had our AJ and myself to answer to, but it was stressful. Of course, most people wouldn't see that. They just saw the other side. Oh, you guys got more space and all these products. And like, I've still got hair, just, right? But we made it through that, and that was really a step change. And so that was sort of 2013 to 2015 was probably the most stressful period in business. So we knew we had a real tiger by the tail at that stage. So AJ was going back and forth to Oz. So in the peak of his time, we got ranging there for the new Asano brand. He did 30 trips in a year.
Wow.
So he was on that, and that's on a 7 o'clock flight back and forth,
It's horrendous.
Really, really exciting the first 30 times. No. But after you'd done it 100 times, not so much. So you didn't even see, going back to when we stayed, early story, stayed in a hotel, you'd be on the 7 o'clock. You'd go straight to the office, you'd do the presentation, you'd go back to the airport and wait. You'd go back and you'd be in your bed probably at 2 o'clock in the morning. So, your real commitment to be doing that on and off. But we saw that over time, we saw that really wear down people that we employed doing that. Sounds exciting.
Yeah, you only do it once, maybe 2 or 3 times, and then realize it's not. I have hopeful entrepreneurs pitching out all the time. Yeah. They're in jobs or they're perhaps coming out of university. And if anyone ever says that one of their superpowers is that they're prepared to work really, really hard.
They love queues.
Yeah. Right. Haven't thought about that one. But if they work hard, I'm like, that's like a table stake these days. You need to work hard to succeed as an entrepreneur. Like, you can't be the smart person. I used to have a buddy that he had an expression which was, you give the hardest job to the laziest man, he'll find the easiest way to do it. And that was his mantra around running his life. He's still selling cell phones today.
Really?
Because he wasn't prepared to work hard.
Yeah.
All right. So his mantra was try and find the lazy, easy way to do things. And so you just can't avoid hard work. Now, I'm not saying don't work smart, but it means that work smart and work hard, and you'll get twice as much done as the other guy, but probably 4 times as much done as the other girl, because you're prepared to double those things up.
Absolutely.
So along this journey, you decided to take some funding from a private equity firm, from Pencaro.
Yes.
What stage was this and why?
Yeah, so So we're 5 years into our Sano journey. We've doubled the size of the business.
So what sort of revenue numbers are you talking about now?
I think we're around about 24, 25.
Yep.
No?
Mm-hmm.
And with the hair care, we could just never get past 10, and we tried for quite a while.
Right.
But it doubled it pretty quickly. So now I guess the takeaway through that, we now had an infrastructure that could manage sales at around that level. And that is probably the most stressful period in a lot of businesses. So I would suggest that when you're making product, especially, because you need much smarter people to manage much smarter people. You need much better facility, around finance and, getting the capital inflows and paying the bills. So that was humming by that stage. And so we're really looking further afield. So there's only going to be so many shelves you can get in supermarket. So you're either managing that stock yourself, or you're overseas, or it's new brands. So we were looking at all of them. We still had strategy walls. Going back to our earlier conversation, they were a little bit more sophisticated. We had board, we had smart people in the industry on our board, and we knew, okay, how long do we want to keep running this fast, and where can we take it? So that's really where the private equity, because it wasn't specifically private equity. We were really looking, that the venture capital space, especially if we wanted to get into other markets. You can either go over yourself and be based there and get all the learnings and hope it works out or find the right people, or you get the smart people on your team and go straight into those markets. So that really was our strategy at the time. So we had a good look around. Pinkara, they were great fits. One of the longest been around private equity firms, specialize in exit. Really good people to deal with. So we started that conversation really, and that enabled us to get better processes and structure, and just that whole due diligence piece. We knew that was going to be important at some stage, so it gave us the time to get our ducks in a row around that. And of course, then COVID happened. So I think we don't have to relitigate that period, but it was certainly that changed your strategy pretty fast.
Yeah.
We suddenly became a hand sanitizer manufacturer pretty quickly.
No doubt.
I'd be surprised at that.
Mm-hmm.
So I have another story on that one too. So as it turns out, hand sanitizer, the thickening agent that goes into making hand sanitizer, is the same thickening agent that you have in hair gel.
Huh.
Surprisingly enough, we were the largest hair gel manufacturer. So we had all the contractors, calling out to us if we could sell them hair gel thickening agent to put into their hand sanitizer, and as it turns out, we could. So they were interesting times, and of course that literally, I got on a plane to go to Expo West in Anaheim, California, which is a great natural show in America for consumables, cosmeceuticals, cosmetic and food. I literally got on a Air New Zealand flight on the 10th of March in 2020. And I don't know if you guys remember what happened maybe a couple of weeks after that day.
24th of March was the first lockdown day, because I arrived in New Zealand the day before it. 25th was the lockdown day. I came back from living in Sydney on the 24th. And so it was in hazmat suits and masks at the airport. It was crazy. Someone delivered one of my cars to the airport. We jumped in that and went down to the mountain to a friend's batch for a couple of weeks and lived on the beach for a few weeks while we did our isocation, as Tina called it. It was amazing, and also like, what the hell's happening to the world? So
yeah. Well, I mean, you had all the so the first outbreak had just happened in Anaheim, where I was flying to, and so my wife was quite stressed about it. I said, look, I got my hand sanitizer, I got my mask, it'll be good. Got on the Air New Zealand flight, no one had a mask on. Land, go to the hotel. AJ texts me and said, it's a pity they cancelled the show. So didn't know that. So the show had been cancelled while I was in flight. So I hung out there for a week. I had a look at changing my flights, but it wasn't really worth doing. Caught it with a few people I know. 7 days later, on the flight coming back, everybody had a mask on.
Yeah.
So in that 7 days, the world changed. The world changed. And of course, that dovetails back into what we're talking about, Josh, just in terms of pivoting and strategy. We had to really take stock and pivot ourselves at that stage. So suddenly we're doing a lot more hand wash.
Yes.
Antibacterial hand wash.
Yes.
Hand sanitizer. And I knew there was only a period of time, that was going to stay that way. So and then within sort of 6 to 12 months, we're back to business as usual.
Yeah.
But consumer habits had changed through that period, right? So there were a lot more bulky packs. Everyone was concerned about washing. So the hand wash categories just exploded, right?
Yes. Again, one of the trends.
One of the trends, yeah. So we were fortunate enough to, we had a lot of packaging, we had all the hair gel stuff, so we were able to sort of adapt to whatever came our way. So
So, Pencaro, you were intentioned about bringing them on because you thought that there's going to be an exit at some stage in our future.
Yeah.
And so what we should do is we should take some money off the table now, plus bring that experience base that the investors are likely to have so that they will enable us to build a more attractive asset. That was the thinking. Is that right?
Yeah. And look, it's sort of probably networks and contacts too. I mean, it's a reasonably small world in that space, right? It's who you know. So we knew that they knew what shape we'd need to be in to be in the right shape for any potential exit.
Yeah.
And we weren't in a hurry to get out.
No.
We weren't rushing. We knew, we just had this we just doubled the size of the business.
24 million.
Yep. Getting the business in shape. And then we brought them on to sort of at a board level and then into the business as a shareholder.
Yeah.
To add that.
So that was the sequence. So bring them onto the board, makes sense. They then decided, let's work out some terms that are agreeable to both of us. The other thing you mentioned was due diligence and data rooms. So this is me talking about the things that are really helpful for people to do in advance of them going through a sale process. Yeah. So having the data room, having your contracts all in place, having everything tidy, clean, accessible, consistent, super, super important, having a board structure, having everything documented and minuted, and clarity of decision-making and independence of governance from the executive team, the leadership team, those things as well. Was there anything else that I missed from that list?
So really important with that too, Joshua, because if we want to see the value of that stuff, have a look when they don't do it and someone does come calling and there's business as usual to be done, but you haven't done the DD work. It's a nightmare. Yeah. It's an absolute nightmare. And you quite often will blow the deal because you're not ready. Yeah. Right. And so it's really important that there is a basic checklist and you've got the right people working on the right thing. And of course, I think the other bit is, people that are interested maybe in your business, those deals might not go through. So there has to be a bit of hand holding around, how much of the business even needs to know around why these new people in fancy suits are going through your factory. Yeah. Right. So you have to sort of manage that process. And you need smart people who've done it before to hand hold you through that.
Totally. So the actual acquisition, let's move on and talk about that now. So we're post-COVID, you're making soaps, sanitizers, and you've also back to making all the hair and the skincare products as well. So how did you decide that you were going to take the business to market, or did someone come and approach you? What was the turning point there?
Yeah, so we had a brokerage in Melbourne that specialised in our area. And so we started initial conversations with them. Any potential deal, I think we were going to be quite small for them. But again, they had the networks and the reach. And it was really just, starting those conversations with them. And then the right purchaser reached out. And again, it was my takeaway through that. We never thought anyone would want our manufacturing. We always thought they'd want brand, maybe around the IP or the development, but they really wanted manufacturing in New Zealand. So, which was really a win for us because what I didn't want to have to do was tell the whole team that we're sold and we're shutting down. So they, it was a real positive process of, saying, look, we're bought by an Aussie company, so we're going to be an Aussie owned company. But, and they've been great people right through. I was out there a couple of weeks ago. And all the manufacturing stayed. So made in New Zealand was not only a key thing that they wanted to do, I think it was just identifying that the value of made in New Zealand does hold weight. People read that, and I think it's a really important thing. So it was a real positive to be able to sort of expand on that and speak to the suppliers or keep supplying to the New Zealand business. Yeah. So it was a positive all around rather than a shut up shop, move it to Oz. Yes, it's their job, right?
Yeah. Love it.
So that was good. It was a good process.
The Aussie brokerage, did they run like a structured process where they took you out to market, or was it more discreet? And
they already had people,
right?
Yeah.
So you're on the phone and they're like, we've got 3 people that could be interested to talk to you.
We want to go through your factory in 3 days.
Oh, wow.
It was literally.
And so the deal was like, how long was the time for
The DD process and from start to finish, I think it was 10 months. So it wasn't quick, but the initial, engagement with them, and actually we've got someone that will be interested. Can we be there in 3 days? Okay, sure.
Remarkable.
Yeah. So things, and to your point, if we hadn't had the background in and the, all the due diligence, we didn't have data room for that specific deal, but, ducks were in a row to be honest. There's a lot of work to be done. I sort of take my hat off to people in the deal.
Yes.
On our side. They busted an ass to get it done, but they were there. Everyone knew the expectation. And yeah, so it was all pretty positive.
So what was the multiple?
So this was in the Australian Financial Times, actually announced there before we managed to tell everyone. So we got a 8.2.
8.2 times EBIT.
Yeah.
Remarkable multiple.
Yeah. So, and part of it was strategic. They really wanted manufacturing. We had manufacturing, so that that really worked. And again, it's all working out. They've kept all the core team there. They've got some great IP, some real good learning. There's probably less chief jokes now and less spiky hairdos. And they were a bigger business than us, so quite sophisticated in lots of areas. So they've really been able to add their bit to the story, which is great. It's the best we could hope for.
And so you stuck around for a year post the deal, whereas I think AJ had a much shorter period of time involved in that earn-out piece.
Yeah.
What was that?
So no earn-out. We got paid out.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cash up. Actually, just before I talk about that, can I ask what the multiple that the private equity firm was able to make from their investment to their exit? So not the actual number, but how many times did they multiply their money? 2x, 3x?
Oh, look, I couldn't tell you off the top of my head.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, I really couldn't. Knowing this will be on film, I wouldn't want to take a guess either.
Yeah, fair enough. So back to the earn-out piece, you didn't have an earn-out, but you stayed in the business for a whole
year. Yeah. Well, just identifying, they were getting manufacturing. I'd been heavily involved, as you heard through the story, through that manufacturing piece. I was quite light touch, though. We had, there's really smart people in the business at the stage managing all that process. So I stayed around to handhold some of that. AJ was very, very export focused. So I already had skills in that area, so it was pretty logical that what needed to happen.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Okay. And so post the deal, we're 14, 16 months or so post the deal now, maybe a little bit longer than that, 18 months.
Yeah.
You're in kind of semi-retirement, but you've been investing in some things, looking around at a few things here and there.
Well, I only finished up in end of March.
Yes.
And then I went and drove around motorbikes in Turkey for a month.
Amazing.
It's great fun. Yeah. Excellent. Amazing country to be driving around bikes. And I've been hanging out with family. I've had a look at a few things, but I'm not in any hurry to get anything, Josh. So I'm advisor to a couple of smaller businesses. So it has been good to be able to give back. I mean, that's something we haven't really discussed pretty much in all of our trials and tribulations. There was always someone that we could call or ring or go and ask. Quite often we didn't maybe even have a direct connection to them, but we knew someone that did. And people they want to help you. If you go all cards on the table and this is what's going on, what do you think? So it has been, I think, really good to be able to sort of give back a little bit in that sense too, because you've now got this wealth of knowledge of nearly went out of business and didn't. And there were a couple of lessons there, and I probably wouldn't do that. There is definitely a bit of that giving back that you've got to do. And that's encouraging the whole infrastructure to keep moving along and advising around that space. There's been a little bit of that.
Yeah.
Very passionate about brand New Zealand exporting. We've been in all those markets going on for a long time. Some of the lessons we got, no matter where we went, whether it was Hong Kong, places in America or even the UK, the Aussies have been in there just before and done a really good job. So there was always this, in our space anyway, in beauty, there was always this quite high expectation for us to really raise the bar around that stuff. And that was good. I think that tension, especially the geopolitical tension around that, forces everyone to just be on their game, right? I don't know how that relates to tech, but in our space, it's been good. I mean, you've seen the rise of what they call the jutes. So it's been seen as quite a negative, where a lot of the big brands have been copied by these fast-following ones, probably a little bit like how Zara can be perceived. Very specifically a brand called MCO Beauty.
Yes.
And your wife probably far more familiar with them. So they literally have taken these really expensive brands, done very, very similar copies to it, and have got traction in a lot of the big retailers. And although it was seen as a negative, I've seen a lot of the data now to show that there's actually been a flow-on effect back to the big brands, because a lot of the younger generation would never buy the big brand because they were too expensive. Right? So they bought the dupe, bought into the brand values, and are now saved up and have gone and bought the more expensive ones. So there's sort of this loop. So to your point, what's perceived as good or bad or ugly or not ugly, but often there's always an antithesis to it maybe we hadn't quite picked. So that's been a really interesting thing to sort of stand back and have a look at.
Yeah.
So it'll be interesting to see, what brand values come out of this for how to build a brand. I think will be slightly altered based on that scenario, right?
Yeah, interesting.
And, we've had a couple of, probably 2 or 3 reasonably tough retail years out there. So that also hampers innovation. And we always saw that at a store level, there'd be less innovation in brands. I think we're going to see over the next 12 to 18 months, we'll come out of that space. So it'll probably be a more fertile ground for smaller brands or more edgy brands or innovative brands, or, that'll come back into the market, which will be good.
Yeah. Tough times always lead to creativity, innovation, ways of doing things. And so whilst it's been an unbelievably tough year for a lot of people, I heard the other day the liquidation figures are out for the year, 5,000 businesses this year, 2,500 last year. Brutal. Really brutal. Horrible. And also I'm aware that there's a lot of companies that have kind of found out better, smarter, cheaper ways to do things over this time frame because they've been forced into that situation. Plus from those ashes will come a whole lot of new startups into next year and the year after. That's the way of things. It just, it's like I was walking through the Australian outback one day, and I'd lived through the bushfires in Sydney, so the 2019-2020 bushfires, and I experienced that from travelling around and not being able to go places, and ash floating through Sydney.
Wow.
And then in 23, I was back in Australia walking through the Blue Mountains, and I'm walking through this area, and I'm like, there's all these black trees that are around me. And I'm like, of course, the bushfire raged through here, and it was so green and so lush. And I came up with this realization that the bushfire is actually not always a bad thing. It's often renewal. And in certain types of forest, they actually need the fire to spark the release of the seed from different types of plant. And so from horrible, difficult, awful, comes some form of renewal. So, there is that thing that happens afterwards.
Unless it's your house burning down.
That's not fun. No, I totally get it.
Then it's a different story.
But I get your point. Yeah, it's around cycles, right? And cycles, seasons, and I think it's why I love living in New Zealand. We don't get extremes of seasons, but it gets cold here and it gets hot here, but not Australia's hot.
Not Canada cold.
Yeah, not Canada cold. So we've got a reasonably good climate.
I like it.
Yeah,
Shane. There's an alternate universe, and there's another Shane Young that lives in that universe. And he's got a deeply satisfying career that wasn't a hairdresser, barber, entrepreneur, product creator person.
Has he got spiky hair?
Probably does. I think that's the same Shane. That's consistent. But he's got this deeply satisfying other career. What is that other career that Shane has?
Oh, wow. I don't think we've been asked that one before. Josh, what is that other career? I don't know. I'm going to need to ponder on this.
Yeah, okay.
What is that other career?
Okay, no problem.
No, I couldn't tell you.
Okay, great.
It's probably not the right answer.
It's an answer. So what a great, far-reaching, wide conversation that we've had.
Excellent. And look, I did tell you, I brought props.
Oh, show us some of the props.
Dominate now does a mousse.
Yes.
So this is a good promo for them because these are amazing product.
Okay,
Matte clay spray.
Sculpt and shine.
So here's some of the Sano.
Yes, I remember that.
My wife did say this is leaving. You're not stealing all the product out there. But
okay.
Look at this blood. Still amazing selling candle.
Love those candles.
Look at this quality. Look at the quality of these.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, it's well put together.
And
aluminium free. Love that.
And here's still the Dominate.
Yes. Okay.
Dominate hairstyle.
Incredible.
Are these for me?
That's for yeah. Well, that's all I could spare.
Yeah,
I used to have more access to more stock.
You've seen me in the gym.
Yeah,
Use that
I think that's a conversation we had, isn't it?
Yeah.
I have been at the gym a couple of times, and there's been a series of people using Dominate and then someone using Sano Man, but it's probably not that cool to go up and say anything about it. So I don't.
Let someone else.
Yeah, let someone else.
Yeah, we're in New Zealand both, so
Exactly. Awesome.
thank you for the gift, Shane.
Yeah.
Thank you for the gift of sharing the story and your insights and the wisdom that you've shared with the audience. And I look forward to following the next chapter in your life.
Thanks, Josh. Yeah, appreciate that.
Cool. Thanks, Shane.
Awesome.
Thanks so much for listening to the show. Your ears are really important to me. If you haven't already, why not check out joshconry.com. There's a bunch of free resources on there, a downloadable chapter of my upcoming book, 2 commas, a diagnostic to help you understand where your business may be at in relation to your exit journey. And why not feel free to drop me an email with any feedback that you could have. The only way I and any of us can improve is through feedback. Thanks again for listening.